Hi guys, welcome to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I have Gabrielle Fundaro back on the show. For some reason, I always introduce you as Gabrielle, and then I end up calling you Gabby and Gab. And what's your actual? Do you have a preferred kind of way people introduce you or talk about you?
No, I kind of, I like that each person has their own unique spin on it. And then, like, it just seems like the farther I get out of the United States, like the shorter it gets. And like Australia's on the other side and they're just like Gab. And I'm like,
Have you
okay,
had
sure.
much G yet? Just G?
No, maybe that'll be my final form. Like, I'll know I've made it when people are just like, it's G.
Fantastic. So obviously people who don't know Gabrielle, she is, kind of are on the podcast, at least as far as I'm concerned, are kind of resident gut health expert as such. And I think people, when they kind of are aware of gut health, and Gabby has a really, really great perspective on that. She is kind of the head of that sort of area with RP as well. And you've been on various other ventures across this year too, which has been fantastic to see. And I think was some important work to come out. So I really wanted to investigate into that as well. And it's actually been, and I look back, it's 9 months since our intuitive eating podcast came out. Where we had the roundtable with everyone, which it was a lot of people, so it was hard to completely get across your points and everything. So we can definitely dig into that a little bit more, and I'm sure you've been working on it more, so more has come out, and you've been able to kind of consolidate thoughts and things on that. So yeah, I'm very excited to just catch up and see where you're at. If I was to start with kind of for 2020, I guess it's been an interesting year for everyone. How's it been for you, Gabby? How have you? I haven't spoken to you too much. I actually feel bad. So for me, this is a bit of a catch up to know how you're doing.
Oh gosh, 2020 has been really something else for me. I mean, personally and professionally. It started with a lot of travel, and I had plans to do much more. So I had already done some road trips, some cross-country road trips out in the US, back and forth between like Georgia and Arizona. When things got really serious with COVID and we were given, kind of like the travel restrictions and whatnot, I was actually in Madrid with Shannon Beer. We were there for a whole week. I was attending a gut microbiome seminar out there. And I came back to the States and realized, hey, I might need to actually like find a place to live. Because I'd been nomadic, and when you get a stay-at-home order, it's nice to have a home to stay at. So I ended up taking one more final road trip from Georgia, where I had landed, back out to Arizona, where I'd flown out to Madrid because I had to retrieve my car. And since then, it's really been I don't know, the opportunity. I've had opportunities to kind of dive into my passion projects, with Shannon working on the Bridging the Gap series and comprehensive coaching framework. Since that roundtable, we've written 3 more articles, actually no, 4 more articles, like 3 articles and then a response to the letter to an editor. I have another one in the works right now. We've also done a 3-part webinar series. We have a coaching community that's growing faster than we had anticipated, which is really exciting. I finished the gut health science book for Renaissance periodization. And so that is now in review. We're sort of in editing processes on that. And Shannon and I are planning for more Bridging the Gap work, webinars and whatnot in 2021. And it's really been fantastic that Nick and all of our P have been really supportive of all of my endeavors in that direction. And I bought a house back in August. And so that was super exciting to, like, I guess that's like the final level of adulting. I don't know, I guess like maybe getting married, but, that I was like, I did this thing, so that was really exciting. So yeah, I'm now out in Arizona. And it's amazing out here. If you want snow, you can go a few hours north. If you want desert, it's everywhere. If you want mountains, also everywhere. I'm now obsessed with cacti, and I'm enjoying things. So it's been difficult, obviously, for the same as many people are experiencing, not being able to see family and whatnot. So being isolated in that way. But thank goodness for technology and being able to do like Zoom calls with our grandparents and whatnot. Yeah. So yeah, I think we're just finding like new ways to connect with people and new ways to disseminate information, because I was able to do a webinar for the Czech Republic, which was really exciting. So yeah, I mean, it's been, great to still have those avenues and the platforms, and lots of time to sit around and write because I'm not traveling.
Thank you for the overview. It's really good to hear that you've had like a good year at least, because I think it's been challenging for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
like, I'm always saying how thankful I am that I work online, because
Yes.
if I wasn't doing what I do now, like, I don't know where I'd be if I was an in-person PT or something. It must have been horrendous for them. I'm also very jealous that you have a house and you're moved in, because I was also meant to be in that position, but it fell through
Oh
COVID
no.
complications. So
Oh.
yeah, it's I know how horrible that process can be. So good job on
Yes.
actually
Thank
getting
you.
that.
Yeah, it was bad. I mean, because I started looking in April and it was kind of like a bumpy ride, and had some really unfortunate experiences with like realtors and whatnot. So actually ended up buying a fully furnished townhouse. Like
Oh wow,
yeah, I didn't have to move anything. I just like showed up and I was like, this is my house. And I'd had a storage unit for like a year in Colorado. So my boyfriend and I went and took a little, like, just a little tiny road trip up to Colorado, got my stuff and brought it back. So it was really nice.
perfect.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I love seeing the kind of the bridging the gap come through, because I mean, I think a lot of coaches who are watching this probably, especially when we start digging into it, if they haven't seen the stuff you've been putting out already, it's just like, for me, it's so much of the things that I am so passionate about just personally through when I'm coaching people. And it's also maybe highlighting things that potentially I can even improve upon or haven't thought about. And I'd first of all, before we kind of dig into it too far, where did it come from? Because I know you've been coaching a while, and then I saw it kind of come out, and I don't know if it had been in the works at all, or if kind of, yeah, what was, because oftentimes, I don't know, the backstory is sometimes very interesting and kind of gives people ideas and perspectives on it.
Yeah. It's so funny because it really came from maybe like my values as an educator, and that there's something in me that I just get so frustrated when I see people arguing about things, and like neither party is fully informed on the topic, and then I'm like, well, this isn't an effective discussion. Like, I don't care what your decision is, but I just want you to make an informed one. I want to get into the gray areas and really dig in and say, like, okay, what's the data to support either one of these, opinions? So that was where the first article came from. That initial article in the Bridging the Gap series, that was Intuition and Training and Eating, was to try to provide accurate definitions for intuitive eating. Like, what is it, as developed by Tribole and Resch, differentiate that from mindful eating, and then bridge the gap between what people, I think, thought was like a very like woo-woo anti-diet movement, and what we use in the evidence-based community, autoregulation, to say that the common thread here is interoceptive awareness. And so, and then, to talk about like the realities of metabolically healthy obesity and the risk of mortality and morbidity associated with obesity, and talk about, the real statistics of weight loss and weight loss maintenance, not to be persuasive, but just to be informative. And then Shannon and I can't remember, I think it was just like Shannon and I have met so many times, and we just like really vibed and worked well together. And so she collaborated with me on that first article. And from there, we thought, gosh, there's so much that we could say. Maybe we need to write another article. And so she was the primary author on the second article that was talking about the pros and cons of dietary restraint, because it was given in a very black and white: dietary restraint is harmful. Well, there's not just one type of dietary restraint. And when is it actually harmful? When is it useful? How can we apply it in a way that mitigates risk for the clients who do want to, pursue intentional weight loss? And then it was mostly, I think, when we were in Madrid that we realized that regardless of, whether we want to be sort of like, helping people with intentional weight loss or whatever, that, the approach that we take to guiding people might play a role in mediating the relationship between a specific dietary approach and developing disordered eating, for example. So we may mediate, the risk of psychological harm. And and also we wanted to understand, like, why is it so tough for people to lose weight, and why is it so tough for people to maintain the weight once it's lost? And that's when we started to learn, like, dive in more in the psychology of dieting and how people can maybe better cope with, like, the external environment. And we realized, gosh, it's not so much about, we can't control our external environment. How can we maybe modify the internal environment so we can better navigate the external environment? And because Shannon and I are very curious, and we liked continuing education and whatnot, we really started to learn more about motivational interviewing. And I realized, gosh, I did this a lot when I was teaching. I did appreciative advising, which is like the academic version of motivational interviewing. So we did a motivational interviewing course together that was actually put together by Rolnick and Miller and Moyers. It's really excellent. And the framework was not intended to be like a novel, like, oh, we created this new shiny coaching thing. It was really just, how can we put this together in a way that makes sense to people so that coaches can see, hey, there are some attitudes, philosophies, and skills that we can use to probably really effectively help our clients based on this huge body of evidence. And then we got some feedback from actual experts like sports psychologists and health psychologists to modify the framework and make more sense to people who really know about that stuff. And from there, we thought, okay, we felt confident that what we've put together so far, although it's still iterative and it's still going to be improved upon, could be helpful for people, mostly because people told us that it was helpful. I mean, like, we didn't intend to do the webinars. We just wanted to create write these articles and say, here's a thing we think could work. And then people were like, oh, are you putting a webinar on for this? And we were like, yeah, okay, sure. And then the Facebook group, we felt bad because people kept asking us to put together a community, and we were just like, oh my God, I have so many things to do, so we finally got around to doing that. And, people are joining. And so it's really exciting because what we hear from the members is that they are lacking a sense of belonging in the industry right now because they don't feel comfortable signing up for one camp. They don't always want to be like the, macro counting intentional weight loss camp. And they don't always want to be, in the intuitive eating camp. They're like, can there be a gray area? Can these things coexist? And we assert that, yes, they can. And the best approach for someone is chosen by that someone, and we help guide them.
Yeah, I think it's something very interesting, especially, I guess, for the listeners and like for me as well, because I've always approached, I guess, when I think about a client coming to me, oftentimes it is for like fat loss or muscle gain. And then it's like, okay, so scientific head-on evidence-based practice where we need like calories, macros, nutrient timing, supplementation, food composition. And it's like, but discussing the role of like why, I guess part of it is, why do you want to gain the muscle? Why do you want to lose the fat? If it's not like a competitive endeavor, kind of what's the kind of reasoning behind that? And that, I think, is the real kind of coaching element that starts coming out, because then once you start digging into someone's kind of strong whys, then you kind of get to be able to help them actually pick and choose things that they then want to do, rather than just being like, oh, I have to track all these things, and it becomes a chore, and I don't know, it becomes a much harder challenge. Whereas when someone understands, I guess, I don't know, I want to gain muscle because actually that is going to give me more confidence in life, or whatever it might be, it allows them to kind of stick to a certain protocol a little bit more comfortably. I don't know if there's like if a client comes to you with a goal, is there something questions you try and ask and to try and like pick this apart?
Yeah. I just ask them why. Why is that important to you? What, or when a client is feeling torn, they're feeling ambivalent. They want two things that are at odds. So quite often, when people are on the journey to something that's sustainable for them, they are in a spot where they don't feel entirely comfortable not tracking. They think that they need to track, they think they need to count calories. They think they need that structure, but they are so overwhelmed by how cumbersome and invasive it's become that they don't want to do that. And when they have a moment of like, I want to start tracking again, I just ask, okay, what need would be met by that? And then we really start to dig into like, do they really need the information of those numbers, or do they need a sense of security and control? Because that one thing is a tangible, useful tool and it's informative. And the other thing might be something that's like a maladaptive response to like other stressors in their life. So so we base this sort of on the self-determination theory that all activities require motivation. It just feels like we don't need motivation when we're intrinsically motivated to do something because we enjoy it. No one has to tell me to go to the gym or to go hiking. Like, I love doing that. And we often conflate that with the perception of not needing motivation. Oh, I don't need motivation to do this. And then clients might be confused about what motivation actually is. And they think, oh, I don't have as much motivation as this person. Like, I wish I had that much. In fact, it's just, can we potentially shift their source of motivation so that instead of it being externally regulated, like, I don't like my body, or, oh, I feel guilty if I eat this food, or I'm ashamed when I look in the mirror or in a bathing suit or something, can we potentially shift that to a more internally regulated source of motivation? Like, I am a good role model for my kids, or I'm a person who likes to move my body. That's part of our identity. Can we tie it to our values of family, of health? Then it feels like we need less motivation. It's really just a different source of motivation. So exactly like you said, finding that strong why, that's really what helps people do the things that they want to do.
And it's interesting, the motivation talk, because I know, I have certainly said it before, and like, going to the gym is like brushing my teeth. It's just like a habit. I don't need motivation, but I guess even if it feels like it's a habit, it's still linked to a motivating core. It just doesn't require much for someone who's just day in, day out doing it. And ultimately, I know how much it means to me and my why behind it and the values I've got for it. But for some people, they might need to dig into that a little bit more. And I guess in some cases, you might find someone thinks they want 6 days a week training, say, but then they're like, when they dig into a bit, they're like, actually, maybe just 3 or 4 is actually what I really want. And then they get a sense of just better well-being, I guess, because now they get to prioritize things in their life a little bit more so.
Yeah, exactly. That's one thing that helps people to determine their values, is to like see how they spend their free time. And there's really a difference between, what would be ideal versus what's realistic. And that's super useful too. When we're setting goals with clients sort of in the later stages, it's like, what would be awesome for you? What would be ideal? Okay, what's realistic on your absolute worst day? And, that way there's a sliding scale of success, and it's adjustable given the circumstances.
I guess with the kind of the comprehensive coaching model, I imagine a lot of it is cemented upon like educating the client as well, not treating them as if they're just, I don't know, an athlete and they're just told to eat this, do this, or a robot. And you have to kind of, truly, again, it's one of those where if they understand why they want to do something, they'd be more likely to. And then if they understand kind of the reasons why they have to do certain things, they're again more likely to do it. I guess, is that a big part of, I guess, another kind of principle behind comprehensive coaching in that sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. The attitude is how we deliver everything. So we have a philosophy, a set of beliefs about people, that when we're engaging with a client, it's a collaborative process. So when we come together, I bring my expertise and my experience, and the client brings their unique expertise and their experience. And from there, we can have a mutual understanding and respect and trust for one another, that we're going to kind of synthesize those things and find what's best for the client. And that attitude is also one of acceptance. So we meet the client where they are and really do take an individualized approach. And the outcome is flourishing health. So that's prosperity across all domains. So it's their physical health, their mental health, emotional health, but also, social connections as well. So hopefully when a person is pursuing their goals, although some goals are going to be extreme and are going to be prioritized, and there's going to be a shift in the balance of these things, that it's not going to be, complete exclusion and separation from social connections. And, that they are not getting to a place where their whole identity is pinned on just this one competition. Because then what happens when the competition is over? Then what happens when they retire from that career? That way that they still maintain a holistic existence. And it's really about increasing their capacity to do things as well. So if a person starts here and they're plate planning, and that's appropriate and what they want to do, and eventually they say like, hey, I want to learn how to count macros. Okay, we can unlock that box and let's learn how to count macros. So the education process is really where the coach expertise comes in and supplements that client's journey. So that when the client says, hey, I'm thinking about doing keto, and you say, oh, okay, well, have you tried that before? Like, how has that worked for you in the past? What makes you interested in keto? And they say, whatever, it seems like it would be really easy. I love avocados and steak. Oh, okay, awesome. Well, can I give you some information about that diet and how we might go about it? And they're like, yeah. And then you give them the information. And then you say, what do you think about that? Like, how can we use this information to help you? And they're like, wow, I didn't know that I wasn't going to be able to eat fruit. That sucks. I don't want to do keto anymore. So that they're making an informed choice. And that's where we developed that spectrum of intentional eating, just that whatever they're doing it on purpose with all the information required, so that they can use an approach that's really appropriate for them.
Hey, Pascal here. I just wanted to take the moment to talk about our membership site. Inside, you'll find a thriving forum, an extensive exercise library, courses, presentations, and research reviews. All I need you to do is hit the link in the description below and sign up.
I really love that, because especially in this day and age where, and I imagine even more so due to this year, like online coaching is flourishing for good or bad. I'm sure in both realms, but there are definitely, I imagine, kind of coaches who are giving out just like standard meal plans, maybe good and bad foods, like rules and rule books, and kind of just various things like you have to do, a prescriptive cardio protocol or something, and there's just no flexibility behind it. And then the client's left with, they can't get that certain food, and then they're like, I'm just not going to eat, or something like that. And people will be able to reflect upon something like flexible dieting, a lot of people know about. And I think that's probably a big step in the right direction. And you're even going like a step further than that, where it's like, well, you don't even, if you are tracking one, like for a goal, maybe there's a day where you can't, and that's okay. You can just focus on some other things because you are now equipped with these tools that the coach is passing on to you. So eventually that person can go away and kind of do it themselves. I guess there's horrible cases where people leave a coach and they're just like, that's where they put all the weight back on, or they don't see any more progress because they're just like, oh, they had this, the coach had the secrets. I can't get results without it. And actually, through the process of coaching and kind of what you're trying to bring across is you educate that client along the way in a kind of not overwhelming manner, so that they can take and drip feed them, so that by the end of the process, they've learned more about themselves and learned about the tools they can use to individualize it. And I guess ultimately as well, I know you can't individualize for a client without them giving you their side because it's impossible otherwise.
Yeah, exactly that. That's the goal really, is that the clients get to a place where, and this is kind of why when a client has gone through the comprehensive coaching programs, I have like kind of different levels of my telehealth clients, that we graduate. And so we have reduced frequency of interactions. And we, quite often they start with, instead of having like 3 times a week where we're like emailing back and forth and talking and having telehealth, that it's just telehealth once a week, or it's just telehealth every other week, because they do organically get to a place where they just don't need as much guidance or support. They have all of the tools, they know their reasons why, and they have not just the really practical tools of, awareness about like macros and plate planning and things like that, but tools to understand themselves to a greater extent, really reflect, and have enhanced introspective capacity as well. Gosh, when I get home from work, I'm really stressed, and that's when I notice that I will go to the kitchen, but I'm not really hungry. Wow, why is that? Oh, it's because I'm on all day. When I get home, I want to do something that's mindless, but eating isn't really the best thing for me in that moment. I think I'm going to go for a walk instead. So our check-ins really become more about them telling me these things. Hey, guess what I did in the past couple of weeks? And I'm like, oh my gosh, and then I can affirm, the amazing character traits that have, given them the capacity to do these things. And so it really does take a very different shape. And I think this is also, out of necessity, because there are so many AI programs now that can adaptively modify people's macros and whatnot. And for a lot of people, those are super effective. Like if a person is sort of just intrinsically motivated to do that and they really enjoy the process, all they need is the change in macros. But for the people who might be pursuing weight loss as a means to improve like their happiness or something, like when it's something that's emotionally charged for them, or they've been sort of stuck in a diet yo-yo cycle, then those processes are really necessary, to get them to a place that they want to be.
I really like that. And I think it's really important. And something I would love to put an example to maybe is the kind of the client with the ambivalence towards like a various goal. Because I know I've had experience with clients before where they've kind of signed up, they want to do fat loss and they're good kind of for a few weeks, and then they fall off, and they don't really give me any good reasons why it might happen. And they're like frustrated with themselves. They feel like they're kind of, I don't know, kind of obviously wasting their money partly. They also feel like they're wasting my time. They kind of apologize. And I'm always like it's me to be the coach to troubleshoot this, to try and find a solution. Like I'm never upset or mad. I'm just trying to help you get to your goal. Mm-hmm. Do you ever kind of have and I mean, I go down the route of even is fat loss the right goal for you right now? Should we focus on something else? How do you approach that through kind of this more comprehensive coaching model?
Yeah, I think one of the big shifts really is to step out of that role of like owning a person's change, or providing solutions and fixes, which is tough because like we are coaches because we want to help people. And I think a lot of us have the belief that if a client doesn't get their expected results, or we don't give them solutions, that we have not done our job. Like that's our role as coaches, right? So I had to, even in the past few years that I've been coaching, kind of revisit how I perceived myself as an educator, that I wasn't there to give the students the answers. I was there to help my students learn how to learn. And so I was like the guide on the side, And so I needed to rework my coaching in that way as well. And it's been so much more effective to say, you have an innate capacity for change. It's not saying that change is easy, but it's there, and that you have lots and lots of great solutions too. I mean, you're going to have a way better idea about your real life than I do. So while I still give advice and information, I do that later on when it seems like the client is requesting it, or I ask, hey, can I give you some information about whatever? Whereas like the initial stages, when a person comes to me and says, having a hard time sticking to whatever it is, first to validate that's completely normal. Ambivalence is a universal human experience. We want two things that don't seem to be in agreement with one another. And often we'll do the thing that is, a little bit easier in the moment, or we are more internally motivated to do. So when we're comparing something like eating, and relaxing when we're stressed out versus something that's a little more externally regulated, like going to the gym for some people, yes. So it makes sense psychologically that a person would choose sitting and relaxing and unwinding with like a bottle of wine or something instead of going to the gym. It's totally normal. So then how do we help people do the thing that they want to do in the moment when they also want to do this other thing? I think that's where getting to their reasons why is really helpful, and helping them to identify the pros and cons of both approaches. So like, there is a reason why people eat emotionally, that serves a purpose and it's helping them in some way, but they may also perceive that it's harming them in some way. So can we look at the potential benefits and potential harm of doing something else? Can we identify what your needs really are, like, your emotional and mental and physical needs, and how we can better meet those so that it feels easier for you to do the thing that you want to do that's a little bit harder. That's where, getting to those different sources of motivation is really helpful. And like you said, yeah, sometimes fat loss is not going to be the best choice for a person. And we have to figure out, like, why do they feel an urgency? Why do they feel a need to lose fat? Is it because, they have concerns about their health? Is it because they have concerns about their appearance? Do they think that, if they are in a smaller body or if they're leaner, that like happiness is waiting for them at that body? Happiness is waiting for them on the scale. So helping them to unpack that and sort of challenge unhelpful thought patterns and maybe dispel some beliefs that are not really grounded in reality. That can help them as well to navigate those times and make decisions that are more aligned with their values and their goals.
I think, yeah, that's great. I think obviously revisiting the why is a great one. And like, it comes up in bodybuilding all the time because it's like, you need a strong why to get to stage, because you're going to face some of these challenges along the way that are going to really pull you away from, because it's just something that's ultimately one of the hardest things you can do is getting down to those kind of lower body fat percentages. So I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that. But then also, like, as a coach, I completely kind of see it in myself where I'm trying to kind of solve this, but sometimes it can come from them, and you can just ask kind of like, have you got any ideas? And I've definitely done that before. And they often actually, especially people you've been working with for a while, they're obviously very clued up. They almost kind of have a little answer at the back of their head, but some people aren't. They kind of want the coach to do the coaching and they don't want to kind of take that role, so they don't give it. But sometimes you can kind of request that as a coach. So I think that's great. One thing I wanted to ask, Gabby, is obviously I know you've gone from a position where you were once kind of tracking macros and you even were a competitor yourself and everything. And I don't know where your competitive ambitions are now. I know you had some, and obviously you were powerlifting and everything. I don't know where you are with your kind of nutrition and how you're going around things at the moment, but have you transitioned more towards somewhere? I just think hearing your experience as someone, obviously you know this in and out, and you've gone through it yourself, which I think is probably helping you be able to explain it to people. But people hearing that experience might just help some of the listeners who are maybe on that kind of I need to track macros. I can't step away from it. I think that might be nice.
Yeah. I've kind of used the last year as an opportunity to experiment a little bit with myself, and certainly to employ many of the practices of intuitive eating and mindful eating. At the onset of COVID and everything, and having to, because I was traveling and then I would quarantine for a couple weeks at a time, didn't have access to a gym, didn't have access to a food scale, didn't have access to a body weight scale. So it was, one of those kind of like turning point moments of, gosh, I know that I've read about this stuff a lot, and even I was having a hard time trusting myself to make, prudent decisions. And here's the thing. I think this is the realization that I've had recently, that if we think that we need to, like, the right way to eat is that we are hitting recommended macros, right? Like, even if it's on accident, that if we're not doing that, then we're doing something wrong. Then we look at intuitive eating and say, oh, well, how are you going to be able to do this right? Because you're not counting anything. And how are you going to accidentally hit your macros without counting doing something like this? We've completely missed the boat on what the purpose actually is. You know, it's not intended to accidentally hit specific macro ranges. And sometimes we may not hit recommended macro ranges. And that's okay too, because it's in the same vein, we wouldn't tell someone you need to perfect your squat form before you can go to physical therapy. Otherwise, you can't go to physical therapy. No, of course not. Physical therapy is there to rehabilitate. And physical therapy is not about peak performance. It's not about increasing our 1 rep squat max. It's about fixing some dysfunction in movement or injury so that we can get back to, normal function. And so once I really internalized that, I was like, I'm ready to just say like, okay, I'm going to really practice this. And that meant really looking at why I was eating certain foods, why I was eating at certain times. You know, I noticed, for example, there was a pattern when I would get to a new Airbnb or whatever, I'd feel really stressed out. And my first thing was go to the kitchen and make myself some food, because that was a way for me to get centered again. But I was like, gosh, I'm noticing that I'm not hungry when I'm doing this. What do I really need in this moment? I need to feel centered. I need to feel relaxed. So what do I do instead? I can just like go sit on the couch and be like, oh, okay, I'm safe. I'm in this place. So looking at those patterns, you know, of why we're eating, when we're eating, how much we're eating, and how we're eating, you know, are we eating in a very distracted way and whatnot? So I started pursuing that and practicing some more mindful eating. I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm a mindful eating practitioner or anything like that. But there were just times when I was like, I'm really going to just pay attention to this and like see how much of this I actually want to eat. And exercise started to play a different role in my life too, because I didn't have access to anything, you know? So I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm using resistance bands. Or when I got to Arizona, I mean, I can't tell you how amazing the weather is out here, you know, in the spring, and I even like it when it's 110 degrees. I think it's like 47 Celsius or something. It's
Wow.
like stupidly hot. Yeah. And so I just started, you know, I was like, yeah, I don't want to worry about food and macros. Throw some shit into a bag. I've got my snacks to go, and I'm going to be outside hiking and going to farmers markets and whatever I want all day. And I started to pay much less attention to the details of my dietary pattern and more on just like the big rocks. Like I'm eating vegetables at pretty much every meal. I'm, you know, eating whole grains and protein sources and whatnot. I like throw some stuff into a bowl. This looks good. And I was doing that with the concept of gentle nutrition, which is that I'm paying attention to the nutritional qualities of food and how it's making me feel. And I'm not like, you know, overeating to the point of discomfort, even on foods that are really tasty. Cause like, why do I want to eat Reese's cups until I'm sick? I can just eat like 2 Reese's cups and feel good. And then I can eat 2 Reese's cups tomorrow and the day after that if I want to. You know, we come from this place of like, you know, oh, it's about calories in versus calories out and like, you know, energy balance and whatnot, but not if you're doing intuitive eating, then you're doing it wrong. You know, if you're having, you know, you could like eating Reese's cups. No, like there's really not a rule to have, there's not a reason to have this absolutist approach. So yeah, over time, like that was over a long period of time now, most of the year, that's what I've been doing. When I finally did like have access to a scale in a gym and whatnot, I was like, oh, I'm curious. And my weight actually had fallen appreciably. I mean, part of that was probably because like I wasn't doing resistance training. But it was really interesting to see that I didn't eat myself into illness with a bunch of hyperpalatable foods, because my intention was like, I want to feel good after I eat this meal. I want to feel energized and nourished. So yeah, that's been pretty interesting. And then I, you know, also noticed that like some days I was feeling kind of low energy, and now that I have access to an in-home gym, which is really fantastic. And I thought like, okay, now I do kind of want to like count a little bit and like see what I'm doing just habitually. And can I change some things to make sure that I'm like, you know, having some more carbohydrates around my workout and whatnot. So that's what I'm doing. I'm exploring this gray area and finding, you know, something that doesn't have a label, but just feels like very sustainable and is modifiable. And there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Thank you for sharing, because I think a lot of people will get a lot of value just from hearing your own experience there. And I'm interested, how do you feel? Like, how does now feel to, I don't know, a year ago where maybe you were kind of more details with things?
It feels calm, I guess would be a word. Yeah, I think I had one client who had gone through something similar, and I really liked the way she put it. She said that she felt there had been a gentle settling, that she felt like she could finally exist in like the Venn diagram of like athlete and mom, you know, like in this area here where, yeah, I can eat for sport performance and I can also have a cookie that my toddler hands me, you know, and I can have like birthday cake and whatnot, and I can be flexible. Or another one who mentioned that she was so glad she could go out to have ice cream with her son, you know, because it was a different experience for him to be able to have ice cream with her rather than ice cream like next to her. So it's those moments. Or, you know, like I was decorating, like my boyfriend surprised me with cookies the other day with Christmas cookies. And I thought, you know, had this happened a few years ago, I would have felt really guilty for eating the cookies and really guilty for not appreciating the cookies. And maybe I would have even said like, hey, don't get me any cookies, you know, like I can't handle myself around them. And now I'm in a place where I'm like, oh, we had a whole bag of Halloween candy in the pantry. You know, there are chocolate chips and whatever other like really delicious foods. And I don't feel stressed being around them, which is great, especially now that we're like at home all the time. You know, I mean, I really feel for people who had an extra sense of foreboding about being in their homes with their food, just because they had a hard time, you know, navigating that environment. But yeah, it was surprising. I mean, I definitely had the experience of like that pendulum swing of like extreme restriction and like, you know, adherence and like weight loss and whatnot. And then getting to the gray area, getting to maintenance, it just felt like I couldn't settle in one place, because I still had this sense of like, there will be restriction in the future. I won't be able to eat this food in the future, or I really shouldn't be eating this food. And even anecdotally, clients have said, you know, gosh, I noticed that like I had a hard time really controlling my intake of this specific food. And I will just ask like, oh, you know, what are you thinking in those moments? And you're like, oh gosh, I guess I'm still thinking that like, I'm going to restrict this in the future. You know, and that's that sense of restriction, even and looking at sort of like predictors of disordered eating, and how people perceive, you know, the cognitive effort of a diet, like the cognitive restraint, perceptions of deprivation. That's one thing that comes up pretty often, that, you know, when people have just thoughts about it, that might spur them into an episode of overeating. So giving myself that unconditional permission to like, I can eat this food whenever I want. How much would feel physically good to eat right now? Maybe not as much as what my tongue thinks, you know, like, so it's when we're practicing this, it's not that I'm eating everything that tastes good, regardless of how it makes me feel. It's that I'm synthesizing what tastes good, what is really satisfying and filling, and what feels good digestively in that period of time, and using that information. And then also like, how am I feeling physically? Like I mentioned, you know, I felt for a little while like, hey man, I'm rough at the end of the day. It gets to 4 o'clock. It's time for me to lift. And I'm just like, why am I even doing this? And then I think back, you know, maybe I count up really quick. I've had like 90 grams of carbs today. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to make sure that like I have, you know, increase my oatmeal or whatever. Like we don't have to have, I think, a very, like, doesn't always have to be super regimented, in most cases. Of course, if I were about to get on stage for a show, although I know that there are competitors that don't count macros, it might be really useful to do that. Mm-hmm. But again, not entirely necessary. You know, I think that what's necessary is just like up to that person.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we pride ourselves on providing personalized service that will take your physique and knowledge to the next level. If you're interested, check the description and sign up. I really like that, and I think it's something you described earlier that I wanted to come back to, and I think it's becoming more well known. Is you kind of had the comparison of like an injury and seeing a physio as to kind of having like macros and then having a day of like intuitive eating maybe, or a day off macros, whatever it might be. And I think it's really tangible for people to think, but that's a physical injury. And it's like, well, you can't see the mental injuries. And you kind of touched upon one there in terms of people not being able to like incorporate a certain food because they're just worried they're going to eat it all. Maybe it's like cookies, whatever it might be. Would you say if someone's listening to this and like, I'm that person where if I'm not tracking and then you give me like a box of cookies or it's in the cupboard, I know I'm going to demolish them. Are they the type of person that needs to go like see the physio, or rather they need to explore potentially kind of some of this healing with taking some time away from kind of the practice of more restrictive eating?
Yeah, I mean, part of like our whole impetus for explaining, intuitive and mindful eating and conceptualizing that intentional eating spectrum was to foster a more adaptive relationship with food. And one of the ways that I kind of define our food relationship is how our relationship with ourselves manifests in the way that we behave around food. So it's the way that we think about ourselves, our beliefs about ourselves that will influence potentially what we eat and how much and how we eat it. So if I have the belief I can't be trusted around chocolate, then I may not give myself the opportunity to practice being around chocolate. And so chocolate is an off-limits restricted food for me. And then when I am around it and I eat it, it's really hard for me to be intentional about how much I'm eating because I feel like I'm not going to have it again. And so I might as well, I'm going to eat it all now and just get it out of the way. And then diet starts again tomorrow. So I want to be very careful about the way that I couch the applications of intuitive eating, because it is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not a goal. And it is not only eat when hungry and stop when full diet. It's an entire framework of self-care that encourages us to better meet all of our needs, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and to challenge the idea that we even need to diet, that we even need to be in a smaller body. And that it's not, and there are some contraindications. There are contraindications for mindful eating too. So in some individuals with eating disorders, they may need to start in a different place. They may need to start with mechanical eating, which is where a person is eating structured meals at structured times, at regular intervals, because they may not yet have the ability to identify their hunger and fullness signals. And maybe they're so used to restricting and then having binging episodes that even just having regular meals is one way to help start that healing process. And then in some cases, people might actually need distractions and need to dissociate during an eating period if it's associated with trauma. So we need to, I think, do a better job of like looking in those gray areas and and realizing that like we can't be in the intuitive eating camp or in the macros camp. We have to be in the evidence-based camp. Is here's the appropriate application for intuitive eating. It is studied, I would say extensively. There's strong support for its application in individuals with binge eating disorder, and intuitive eating and other sort of weight neutral approaches are effective for reducing binging episodes and sort of opportunistic eating, where people are just eating because food is available, and even hunger susceptibility. So people can say like, hey, I can recognize hunger now, but I can still make intentional choices about what I want to eat, even when I'm feeling hungry. But if a person has noticed that they're in a place of sort of a chaotic eating pattern and they're having a difficult time trusting themselves around certain foods, I would say that's probably a sign that what they've been doing to this point could potentially have gotten them to this place. And if they want that to change, they might need to do something different.
I think that's really well said. And I think it's such an interesting topic, and I can see why people have kind of wanted to sign up for Facebook groups and for like seeing the webinars and things, because you can keep going into it, and it's not like macros is very black and white, and I guess not tracking and just kind of going down the other extreme is very black and white, and then trying to kind of find somewhere in the middle where you kind of go between both is it's a conversation that I could probably have for you for hours. So I think it's really interesting, and I'm glad that it's coming together, because ultimately, at least the what I'm getting from it is you are caring about the person, and it's not just about the goal of like fat loss, like the physical goal. It's more about kind of, are you actually enjoying what we're doing? Like, are you a happier person? Because that ultimately is more important than anything else, unless it's like a competitive goal. Obviously, I mean that's also important. But most people are coaching, I imagine, aren't necessarily for that. So would that be right? Like, it's kind of, you're trying to get someone like their well-being to be in a good place, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say even for competitors, we drew from Eric Helm's article about, a sustainable nutrition paradigm, even in physique sports, that, even when a person is tracking macros, this is another, I think, important caveat, potentially for both sides of this, like diet, anti-diet chasm, that quite often the behaviors are labeled as disordered, rather than looking at the intentions behind the behaviors. There are some behaviors that are very obviously, harmful, like if a person is purging. But something like tracking macros, some people might label that as disordered. And I think that would probably be a misnomer. I mean, we can look at like diagnostic criteria, and tracking macros is not necessarily fitting within that diagnostic criteria. It's one behavior that could be associated with the development of disordered eating, like sort of along that spectrum. But I think really looking at the intentions and the cognition behind the behavior is really important. And then how a person evaluates their experience. So if a person has, for example, they're tracking macros and they're not seeing the expected weight loss, if they internalize that as, I'm a failure and this isn't working for me. They feel frustrated and whatnot, and they might go to more extreme measures. That could be problematic. And so as coaches, even if we're working with a competitor who's tracking macros, we can still use best practices to help them take a more analytical view. So rather than focusing so much on adherence, we found that can actually reduce adherence over time, but focusing on the analysis of why didn't things go to plan this week? Why was it hard to adhere this week? What could we do differently? And then also how a person evaluates, how a person kind of sets their goals. So having realistic goals and expectations, and then how they cope when those expectations aren't met. That, we can encourage, again, that reflection and affirmations, and focus on strengths and what we can do differently next time after having set realistic and informed expectations, versus something like, a punishment or like a punitive response to them, or focusing on like, well, you didn't hit 100% adherence this week. Like, what do you expect? That's probably not super helpful long-term. So I would say there's even nuance and there's even an art when we're doing something that seems like a very basic skill, like counting macros, that there is still a way that we can guide clients to mitigate the risk that comes with something like that.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I have experience with, because I do often take people through kind of macro tracking, and there are levels to it. It's not just black and white, like you have to land on this number or something. Like there's definitely levels to it, and there's a whole of education behind that. And you're working with potentially people that are, I guess, more gen pop, or they've gone through this and they want to go through like the next level, which is great. And I kind of, it'll be interesting to get down to that kind of level of coaching in future, because I can see there's definitely inroads even towards flexible dieting. A lot of these inroads are here, where it's not a case of, okay, you missed your diet today, but that's okay, we can get back to it the next day. And I can even think of things, I don't know if this is the right interpretation, but I'm thinking like people take a rest day, or they don't feel up to training. It's like, well, you can take a day off, like having to track and diet, and that's kind of just like, I guess, healing up some of these things that need to be healed now and then. And I definitely have had cases where that's happened, and people have that sensation. And it's nice that you're describing it. It's not, I think people do see it as like, you're either this or you're this. You can't combine. There's no methods around that. I know we introduced it a little bit into the Intuitive Eating podcast, but hearing it more developed here has been really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say even taking it to the place of people could take a break like forever from dieting, you know? I mean, the having taken a dive into sort of like the history of dieting culture and expanding my knowledge on the anti-diet movement and health at every size. It was sort of like I took the pill from the Matrix and I'm like, oh, there's this whole other spectrum of existence where people like don't diet ever. And that's, I think, you know, one area that seems strange maybe to talk about as a person who, like, obviously I coach people through weight loss diets. But I think at the heart of it, it's like when we are exploring that reason why, like why a person wants to diet, that sometimes they realize that they don't actually want to diet. It's not that they want fat loss or a smaller body. It's that is a means to getting something else that they really crave.
Yeah.
And it's something they think that they have to do to get that, to be accepted, to find a spouse, to like themselves. And for the most part, although long-term dieting and weight loss maintenance is associated with increased self-efficacy, so people do tend to, they feel more confident in their ability to maintain weight the longer they do it. And, there are, in some cases, it could be associated with improved self-perception. Quite often, the way that a person looks to us, like objectively, an outsider's view, really has very little to do with how they feel about how they look. So, even challenging that idea of like, what will dieting actually get you? What will weight loss actually get you? Where do you really want to be? Like, is there another way that you can get there? Do you actually have to diet like for the rest of your life? Do you have to count for the rest of your life? Do you even have to pursue health? Like, is there an obligation for you to pursue what people consider to be conventional health? I mean, those are just like ethical questions that I think deserve to be discussed and acknowledged in the industry, because as much as we have this sort of like war on obesity and people have beliefs about individual responsibility to pursue, lower body weights and to avoid obesity, I just wonder, I don't have the answer, but I wonder why we don't see that same vigilance applied to like unprotected sex and ped use and alcohol use, like people are just kind of like, you can do whatever you want with your genitals, I guess, like that's fine. But like that communicates disease, so I think that's kind of where we're going with a lot of the articles and a lot of the topics that we discuss in that Facebook group. It's about like bringing these things up. It's about saying, why do we have this, why do we bristle when people bring up like haze? Why are people so, anti on either side? Why are people so anti-diet? Why are people so anti-haze? Those are conversations that I think need to be had in an effective way, where we're trying to seek understanding of one another, not necessarily convince the other side, not blame anyone, not shame someone for, for coaching weight loss, and not shaming someone else for, promoting body acceptance, but just to say like, can I increase my understanding of these concepts and these ideologies, and use that to help people?
I think, again, I think that's really nice. And actually it's interesting to me. I wouldn't say I'm like on a certain camp or anything. I wouldn't like to I'd like to think I'm in the middle somewhere. I just don't have a lot of experience with the haze side. In terms of, obviously, with the two camps, in terms of size, is one bigger than the other? Because I'm guessing a lot of kind of personal trainers as such, like as an industry, they are more about body composition changes for that at least is where a lot of people kind of put themselves. Is it a bigger side one side than the other, or is it because I'm in like a niche and I don't see the other side and you're kind of showing me it a little bit here?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that we even know, like, the relative percentage of like practitioners that would be HAES versus non-HAES aligned. I'm willing to bet because HAES is a little bit newer. So they trademarked the title to protect health at every size. Because I think, they were probably concerned about it being co-opted, sort of like intuitive eating. People use it colloquially to mean all sorts of whatever bullshit they come up with, despite the fact that like intuitive eating is actually a thing. And actually funny enough, there was a really weird intuitive eating book written in like the mid 1990s that has nothing to do with the Tribole and Resch book. And it's about like, going into the sun to detox or something. I found it in a random bookstore in Colorado with Shannon. But I digress. So they trademarked that, I want to say in like 2011 to protect, that terminology, but actually the HAES, approach and the HAES paradigm was developed by the Association for Size, Diversity and Health, ASDA. So it is it's a set of principles and also a way of practicing. So when people are HAES aligned, that means that they are embodying the principles of respectful care and weight inclusivity, and promoting movement and nutrition for well-being. So HAES it's also a social justice movement that's intended to increase access to and information about resources to support and improve health and well-being. But sort of the difference, I think where we see a lot of headbutting between HAES practitioners and anti-diet folks versus the diet folks is that the underlying philosophy is that though we want to increase access to and information about these resources, that we don't expect people to feel obligated to pursue them. That is healthism. Healthism is the belief that people should be pursuing health. And in some cases, people have beliefs that there is a moral obligation to pursue health, both at the individual level, like everyone should be doing their part to be healthy, and also that there's an expectation that we see that at the policy level as well. And so HAES is about increasing, it's about affecting policy level change, and making it more possible for individuals to pursue health. But if they don't want to, they don't have to. Whereas when we are looking at it from a more kind of like culture of dieting centric viewpoint, we look and say, of course people should be pursuing health. What's wrong with you for not pursuing health? You should be pursuing health. So I think that's where I see a lot of headbutting, and I think people just aren't aware that that's kind of what they're headbutting over. Of course, there are other things too. When we make absolutist statements about like all dieting is disordered, and people who coach for dieting are like, you're doing harm. And then on the other side, if you're promoting body acceptance, you're promoting diabetes, those are not accurate or informative or useful statements, in my opinion. And we might be better served by saying like, okay, well, what is HAES actually about? Oh, I think most people would be in agreement that like increasing access to health care would be super awesome. And so if people want to pursue that, they can. And to also say like bullying people into being healthy is like super shitty and we should not be doing that. And, both sides would probably agree on like what fad diets are. So we're in agreement on a lot of things that I think we're just not aware of. And maybe we just need to like, learn a little bit more about like what it is that we're disagreeing over, and seeing if there are some areas where we can just kind of like exist in harmony and say, you can practice the way that you find to be ethical, and I'll practice the way that I find to be ethical. And, unless we're doing like really like measurable harm to someone, maybe we wait and see if, a weight neutral approach is effective. I mean, actually, yes, it is. We've got a lot of data on that. And a weight focused approach can also be effective without causing harm.
Yeah, it's definitely, typical middle ground seems to be the best place, but it's the awareness, and I guess it's the extremes, which is where it needs to kind of be drawn in a little bit. And I like to think hopefully most of the evidence-based practices are somewhat ethical with their coaching. So they are considering a lot of the things that you've spoken about right here, but are taking more of a kind of focused, like, body composition approach. But I think this discussion is like broadening horizons, which is great to that, because it's getting us maybe more so towards the middle. And there might be more, especially as online coaching is growing. Again, we're reaching more of that non-like niche, because it used to just probably be a lot of bodybuilders, and now it's kind of sprawling out to being way more accessible and more people. So I'm very thankful to have this discussion with you, Gabby, and for you and the work that you're doing. I want to make sure if people want to learn more, kind of where should they head to kind of potentially see where webinars are, or to kind of join your Facebook group? Where's the best place for them to head?
Yeah, so they could follow me or Shannon on Instagram. So I'm Vitamin PhD, and Shannon is Shannon Beer, like the drink, _ And we also have a website, btgcomprehensivecoaching.com. So they can read our articles there. They also can link to both of our websites. So we have like kind of individual websites also. Shannon has written some really excellent articles, even one that covered healthism. And they can find our articles there. They can also learn about our Facebook community. So it's the Comprehensive Coaching Facebook community. It is a membership site, but we try to keep it really accessible for people. We post in there 3 times a week. So every week we've got a research article that we share and discuss, and we've got discussion topics as well. In 2021, we already have plans to have another iteration of our 3-part webinar series with our mentoring calls and some other things in the works as well. So we're going to be producing more content, more webinars, both for coaches and for clients, talking about more SDT, so more about motivation, body image, and how to coach and practice along the spectrum of intentional eating.
Fantastic. And then I also want to ask, because you introduced the RP Gut Health book, which we didn't talk too much about gut health. We'll probably do that in future. Do you have any rough dates when that's coming out, or?
I'm not sure on when it like early 2021.
Cool.
It's pretty meaty right now. So we finished it out at exactly 70 pages, single space, with like no pictures or tables or anything like that. So,
nice.
Yeah, so it was huge. So that might be pared down a little bit, and, we're going to get some diagrams in there and whatnot, because like just describing the enteric nervous system probably, doesn't do it justice. So yeah. And then looking into releasing some more products, more gut health associated products, and or some like form of coaching with RP. So yeah, just keep your eyes peeled. 2021 is going to be a busy year.
Awesome. I'll make sure that's all linked below so people can access that. And thank you again for coming on, and thank you to everyone for listening.
Thank you.
So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.